My name's Scott Mann. I can't assume everybody knows me. I'm the VP for Scale Computing International. VP, I think every slide that you're ever going to see with me has a different title on there. Call me whatever you want to call me. And we have Craig Teriak joining me, who is our VP of Product Management.
Yep.
Technically,
That's
okay.
right.
Jack of all trades as well. So first, I'm not going to rehash everything that we all know about everything that's happened from the VMware acquisition from Badcom or Broadcom, sorry. Uh, we all know what's come of this, and we've talked about this at nauseum over this event. There's been a lot of changes that have happened, right? VMware is now specifically more targeted towards a smaller niche market that they're catering towards, and they're leaving a pretty wide gap in the market. Now, we've always been that VMware alternative, or as some of my reps like to say, we're the new next gen virtualization solution. Happy with that one, Natalie? Is that good? Okay. And we're trying to now, there's this big opportunity in the market where VMware is leaving behind a lot of its customers, a lot of its partners, and people have a need for that alternative solution out there. And to be that alternative solution out there, we can't just provide an appliance. We can't just couple the hardware and provide the software in all scenarios. So the point of this is to make a more flexible go-to-market opportunity for us so that you can get the software from us and you can get the hardware from all your different trusted sources. How are we doing that? We're introducing a program called AIP, Authorized Imaging Partner Program. If you guys saw, I think there might have been something on the stage, or yeah, there was. On the product roadmap, there was the QR code, and I think half of the people in the audience already filled out that QR code because I get emails when you fill it out. And I got a lot of emails yesterday. So that's the worst kept secret right there. But what AIP is basically empowering or enabling our OEMs, integrators, distributors, VARs, MSPs to be able to provide HyperCore ready infrastructure in your market. So that's being able to basically source your own hardware and still be able to provide that fully integrated appliance solution that you're used to with scale computing without any of the differences in the functionality of it. You're just getting all the benefits of, you have a reason that you want that hardware locally. You're gonna move away from that. I think it's that. We're good
I
now?
don't know. It's just as long as it's not me.
No, I think it's that guy. The mic, not that guy. Um, so being able to provide that solution yourselves with our software and a hardware combination. So HyperCore ready, what is that by definition? You're all probably familiar with different other software solutions that are something ready, and that's the intention of it. It's being able to source your own hardware on anything that's on our HCL. Craig's gonna go over that list of what that HCL looks like. So all the vendors that you're familiar with getting from us, typically under our appliances, like Dell, ASUS, Simply Nook, Supermicro, Lenovo, and being able to get the software from us, HyperCore software that you're used to, image that and create HyperCore ready nodes that you can sell into your markets. Now, the big advantage from this, if you look at that hardware, this is going to exponentially expand the amount of options that you can get with those hardware vendors. So while we create great appliances and we know what market that those appliances are going to serve, now this is, maybe there's a different area that you need to go into, and this is giving you the ability to be able to be more flexible with those hardware configurations. Still getting feedback there? My back
It's not bad.
So where are you going to source this different hardware from? So I mentioned it already. If you weren't paying attention, we'll go over it again. OEMs. So we're working with our OEMs to try to get them to be able to onboard this new validated software, so that we can be more flexible, getting them imaged at the OEM. And that's going to give you a global footprint, right? Anywhere that the OEM sells, like a Simply Nook, a Lenovo, once they're onboarded, they'll be able to sell this to any region that they have the capabilities to sell this into. Or integrators. Integrators is basically taking what we already do right now and bringing that into whatever region that it is, so that we have somewhere where you can source the hardware from in EMEA, in LATAM, in APAC, in India, some of those areas where it's very difficult to ship halfway around the world to. Or your distributors. Some distributors have capabilities to be able to do some of these staging and imaging and everything. So you have a distributor that sells Dell, Supermicro. We want to have those conversations to get them up and running. We're already having great conversations. If you guys haven't checked out the showcase floor, there's Titan out there. Titan is integrated. Their whole signage is Titan integration with Supermicro. So they're based out of the UK. They're one of our distributors and one of the early adopters of this program. So it's really already up and running there. And then of course, if you're a VAR MSP, you can get the hardware yourself. If you can get the hardware at a cheaper price, if you have a great relationship with a hardware vendor, we're not trying to displace that. We're trying to be the VMware alternative. We want you to get that hardware from whichever source makes the most sense. And all of these are going to have different variations of what makes the most sense. So we want to make it very flexible so that you guys can source it from what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your customer, what makes sense for the market that you're in. What are some of those benefits that we're going to talk about? So first of all, from a partner perspective, it's that loyalty preservation with that hardware vendor, right? There's a reason that you that you want to sell that hardware vendor. Maybe it's rebates, maybe it's lead flow that you're getting from them. We don't want to disrupt that at all. We want to just take away the VMware part of it and you can go get that hardware from them. Sometimes there's scenarios where we need hardware faster. I had a customer in Singapore and they asked me for hardware basically in like 4 days. And it's like, look at our time to deploy or ship, and there's no chance we can get it to you in 4 days. Gave Johnny over at Simply Nook a call. Hey, Johnny, I got a problem. Can you do this? No problem. We got it. We got an inventory in stock. We'll get it out on Monday. We were able to get the hardware there in time. So being able to give us a little bit more flexibility with the deployment perspective, we're kind of at the mercy of whatever our supply chain provides us with, right? So maybe getting it regional is going to help you get it there faster. Let's do that. Let's be more flexible with it. And then of course, a big one is competitive hardware pricing. We have a pretty long supply chain when you think of getting it from Scale Computing, going from OEM, integrator, distributor, or OEM, distributor, integrator, distributor, reseller, customer. Right? So with this program, we can kind of condense that, make that a little bit more efficient. So ultimately, you're going to get a better hardware price on the solution and be able to have all the other advantages associated with that. From a Scale Computing perspective, obviously this increases our total addressable market. This is now going from, if you love the appliance, you can still get the appliance. Nothing is going to change there. But this also gives other opportunities for, you have a customer that needs ruggedized hardware. Well, we don't have a ruggedized node on the product family. That's okay. Maybe we can get the exact same configurations on the HCL ruggedized. And then it gives us the opportunity to focus more on the software, right? We want to be the next gen virtualization solution. We need to focus our time and effort on developing the software and using our ecosystem to build out this overall solution. And from a customer perspective, lower TCO, always important. If we're getting more competitive hardware pricing, that's going to bring down our cost to the customer, of course, going to bring you guys more margin, going to give them much more wider options on the hardware side, and it's going to increase the support options. It's one of the things that I've always been asked, like, can we do 2-hour SLAs, 4-hour SLAs? Well, if you're getting it from a hardware vendor that can do that, we can now do that. So this gets a little bit more interesting on some of the benefits. I'm probably just scratching the surface of this. And it looks like from a timing perspective, I'm already over what I promised Craig I would stick to. So with that, I think we all get the point of this. It's very exciting. There's a lot of key benefits to it. I'll pass it to Craig and he can get into some of the more interesting.
This is a promise Scott makes to me every presentation we do together, and he fails every time, and that's all right. That's why we love him.
Sorry.
You're good.
That was a Canadian story, by the way.
I want to make sure we actually have enough time for questions at the end, because there's no way we're going to get to all this, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, because everyone, even internally, has a lot of questions. This is a big change for us as a company. So with this Authorized Imaging Partner Program, I'm going to walk you through how it works, but kind of imagine this Authorized Imaging Partner has already gone through whatever needs to happen to become a partner. So they join the wait list, we've contacted them, we've kind of worked through, here's how this works, here's the training, here's the communication flow, and now it's time to actually engage with the customer. So the very first thing that Authorized Imaging Partner is going to do is size a deal, which should sound familiar. This is exactly what we do for our appliance-based business today. You have to make sure that you understand, what's going to be run over what period of time, what growth is expected, all that stuff. Then you're going to take that and convert it to a BOM on the HCL. So if that whole sizing exercise you went through says, hey, I'm going to look at the HC 1450D. Now I'm going to look at the HCL to find a BOM that represents that HC 1450D, right? So I'm getting a Lenovo example here, and you'll see that little chart on the right, which is a lot of information, is actually from our HCL. So today this lives as a spreadsheet, which is moving to a much cooler tool in the future. But as of right now, this is a spreadsheet we can provide you on Lenovo, Dell, Supermicro, of course, Asus, with Simply Knock and all of that as well. And once you have that in hand, you kind of guide yourself through to here's the BOM that I want to present to the customer. And notice, part of that is selecting the CPU, or CPUs in this case. Select the NICs. Notice there are only 2 of them highlighted there. I'll get to that in a second. Select your HBA, and then select the configuration. And then once you've done that, you've effectively built an HC1450D. You grab that bill of materials that you've created, and you send that to us for a review configuration. And this is an early stage process. We just want to make sure that, especially in the early deals that you're doing, that this matches something so you can have a good experience. I look out in the audience and I see integrators who have used our very strict certified installer in the past and run into issues. One of them in particular I had a conversation with last year. The problems that we're solving with this new program are really designed to solve the issues that those early integrators had. And I'll get into that in a second. Once we review that configuration, we then basically say, all right, it's time to image the hardware. So you purchase the hardware, you bring it in, you then take our validated installer. You might hear us call, there are several terms you're going to hear from us: HCL, VDL, validated. These are all terms for essentially the same thing. So instead of a certified list, we actually have a validated view of the HCL. So I'll walk through it here in a second, like how we're actually doing that validation and making sure you're conforming to that. But the concept is pretty simple when you see it in action. So when you go to install this, you have a USB, you put it in the back of the nodes. We'll give you instructions on kind of the BIOS settings and those sorts of things that you want on it. You install it. It will tell you whether or not it passes. So it runs a self-check that we call the conformance check. And that conformance check, there are a few different flavors of this, but the one you're going to have is called validated. So that's where that term comes from. In this case, it happened to fail. And you'll notice that there are 3 issues that we display on screen that tell you this is exactly what did fail. Now, this is a virtual node, so that's why you see the VirtIO network device not recognized. These are the things that we're going to tell you that are in the box that we didn't expect. And you're going to have to rectify that before you can move on to a fully passed. Now, notice there is, if you look up there closely, you'll see install check passed as well. They're really 2 different things we're doing. One is, does it conform? The other is, it's a different question, will it install, right? So sometimes you might actually want it to install even if it doesn't conform, so that you can get a remote support set up. You can get us onto those boxes remotely to kind of help assist in any way we can. This is also really, really helpful in a proof of concept, right? So if you're going into a new opportunity and a build that we've never used before, it's close to it. Maybe we might have to make some changes and certify something later. You can get something stood up and actually use it in action, but you're going to see this in the UI, which is running on experimental or unknown hardware. And this is that conformance check going all the way through. Once you address that, it will then pass. So what you see on screen with all these boxes, and don't get too into the details here, but I'm happy to answer questions about any of it. There's a certified installer that we use today that has certain guarantees that come along with it, that we say, we know where this port is, we know where this drive is, and we enforce this through a first article process that we go through with our integrators. And our operations team is maniacal about this, and it's great because we can guarantee this exact experience for our customers. Not everyone requires that level of enforcement, and that's where the validated installer comes in. So this is the new technology that we worked on the product team to enable this whole program to be brought to market, which is, it still has the guarantees around the things we care most about. We really care about the controller. We really care about the NICs. We really care about the generation of CPU as well. But outside of those things, do we really care if there are 6 drives or 4 drives or, a mixture of media? Probably not. And so you have a little more flexibility in using the validated as a result. So now that that's passed, I think you can basically take the next step of the process. That next step is that you've got to tell us what that asset is. You saw a lot of demos this week around Fleet Manager and using zero-touch provisioning and the communication that happens because we know what hardware is out there. Our entire process up to this date has been hardware going through, either Lenovo or Simply Knock or through our own integrator. And as part of that process, they harvest the information we need to build a database that we can use for Fleet Manager so that when those nodes go to the customer, it's already there and it's ready. For right now, there's a process that has to happen on the communication of every opportunity where you have to tell us back, hey, this is the hardware I'm going to send to this customer. That way we can make sure that it is there in the database so that when you go to zero-touch provisioning, you're ready to roll. So once you send that, next thing you do is ship the nodes out to the end user, and they have a HyperCore ready node. So that's the kind of full process end to end. As I have HC 1450D in parentheses, is because the idea is we want to emulate our full suite of kind of branded configurations that we offer out there. That's how we communicate to people what a given build is. You don't have to stick to it, really rigidly, as I mentioned, but it's a nice starting point to be able to say, here's how you size this deal. We can all communicate, I think, fairly well in the full family of hardware that we provide. And we can make sure that because we have these appliances ourselves, that we have that full breadth of coverage on those major vendors as you take this HyperCore Ready offering to market. We want to make sure that if you have HE500 all the way up to the HC5000, you're going to have that on Dell or Supermicro or Lenovo. And I'm actually going to jump ahead because one of the questions Scott asked me as we were prepping for this, he says, are you ready for the HPE question? You notice there is a major vendor that is left off this list. HPE is not on the list currently as a certified configuration. If it's not a certified configuration, we can't use it as part of the validated program or part of the Authorized Imaging Partner Program that uses the validated build that enforces that. It is a really common request that we hear, and I would welcome you at the end of this. I'm going to throw that QR code back up on screen so you can sign up for the wait list. Give us that information as part of that. We would love to explore it. So let's talk through the differences really between what an HC 1450D is and that new version based on the HyperCore Ready node that is also an HC 1450D. Number one, the installer type, which I mentioned a couple of times, you have the certified installer for everything that's going through our integration facilities. On the HyperCore Ready side, you have the validated installer. And again, that's just the enforcement of how we're making sure that it matches what we expect. One is really rigid. We care about every single detail, and we create a fingerprint on the certified side that says, here are all the things in every different PCI slot and all the devices, and that together becomes a fingerprint. And if we don't recognize that fingerprint, no, it's not going to install. On the validated side, as I mentioned, we care about the HBA, we care about the CPU generation, we care about the NIC, and if those things conform, it's going to pass and you're good to go. Next thing is hardware resources. The whole idea of this program is we want to be able to offer the equivalent on all of those brands as we do our branded appliances. So that should be a checkbox. We're good to go. And the last thing that, last year I think we stood on stage and really talked a lot about the Workbench Edition and trying to, expand our HCL and letting people use our software in non-production use cases. This is our first entrance into software only in production use cases. And so you'd have the same level of support, still call our same support reps that are ready for these questions. In fact, on the back end, as you know, a lot of the things that we do to make sure the product is supportable is we provide additional information to the support team as they call in. It'll be easily recognizable to them that this is a different type of product. It's the same production support, but they know if there's a hardware issue, there's a different process they have to follow. Which leads us to the hardware warranty. With Scale Computing providing full appliances, we provide the hardware warranty on our certified builds as a result. So next business day, we're making sure things get shipped out, and we do advanced replacement and all sorts of kind of things that our support and services team do to uphold that hardware warranty. In the case of Lenovo, in this case, it would be the hardware provider that is providing that hardware warranty. So we might identify the problem, but then you'll have to go back through whoever's providing the hardware warranty to have that drive replaced. Okay. Next thing up here is network segregation. There is a difference. This is where things get maybe a little too technical, but I'll go through it anyway, just in case anybody has questions. We can talk about it later. Network segregation is different. So if any of you have used our NUC-based platform where we've got 2 NICs instead of 4 fully redundant NICs like we do in a lot of the configurations on the higher end, we use what's called backplane over VLAN in that. We're using that same technology for every HyperCore Ready node that goes out. So if you're sizing an opportunity and you feel like this is going to push the backplane above 1 gig, you might want to go to 10 gig instead, and vice versa. It's like you basically have to take this into account up front. There are some other changes I think we're going to make in the product long term that may address this and make some changes to this, and we'll announce that later. But for right now, everything's backplane over VLAN. Second thing, NIC and dry port error detection. And I mentioned the guarantees that we're able to make on the certified builds because we know where every single thing is placed. We can't make those exact same guarantees. We can tell you that the drive in slot 2 has failed, but we can't guarantee that slot 2 to us is slot 2 to you, that you physically cabled everything the way we expect it to be cabled. As a result, we're going to provide additional information like MAC address and whatever you need to be able to identify that in either out-of-band management, kind of going through Xclarity in this case, or through whatever out-of-band management you need to verify that to make sure you're pulling the right drive. Last thing here is BIOS and firmware management. As you know, with any critical updates that are required for HyperCore, we take care of that for you as best that we possibly can. That is not a guarantee we can make on the HyperCore ready nodes. But the net result is still the same. Full production use of HyperCore on hardware that you've pulled in for your customers and taken to market.